Hi class, welcome to our second introductory lecture, A Short History of the Brain. Our learning objectives for this lecture are to trace the history of our understanding of the role of the brain as articulated by scholars across the millennium. I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to this topic, but it's really interesting to look at. Throughout this course, we'll be examining the relationship between brain and behavior. Although we now know that the brain and behavior are intimately tied together, the importance of the brain was not always appreciated. For example, the ancient Egyptians saved many major organs when preparing their mummies for the afterlife, but they discarded the brain. Even Aristotle, in the middle of the 4th century BCE, believed that the heart was the seat of the soul. During the Hellenistic period, however, the brain and nervous system started gaining attention. Following the death of Alexander the Great, 323 BCE, his general Ptolemy took control of Egypt and the Greek city Alexandria, which soon became a center of learning in the ancient Mediterranean. Here, a Greek physician named Herophilus, his dates are about 335 to 255 BCE, first began to study brains and nerves. About 400 years later, the Greco-Roman physician named Galen, about 129 to 200 of the Common Era, first postulated that the brain controls behavior. Prior to acting as the personal physician to the deeply philosophical Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, Galen was a physician to the gladiators and had first-hand experience treating individuals with brain trauma. He even conducted experiments in various animals where he would tie off certain nerves to demonstrate that those nerves were involved in specific behaviors. He believed that the vital force controlling all behavior, the animal spirits, passed along the nerves to initiate behavior. Galen's influence was profound, and it wasn't until the Italian Renaissance of the 15th century that others started to re-examine the brain. Unlike Galen, Leonardo da Vinci, whose dates are about 1452 to 1519 of the Common Era, dissected human cadavers and used these specimens as models to produce detailed anatomical drawings of the human brain. What we're looking at here is one of his drawings of the ventricles. He mistook these, he knew that they were there, but in this image, that's not how they would appear. However, some later models where he put in some resin into an ox brain, he was able to cast a mold of what the ventricles actually look like. Da Vinci kept his drawings to himself mostly, and used them to benefit his artistic endeavors. The real breakthrough came in the 1549 publication of Andreas Vesalius's De Humani Corpus Fabrica, the first detailed anatomical treatise based on human cadavers. Accompanying the book were very large, detailed anatomical images, including the first published drawings of the human brain and nervous system. I am an owner of a facsimile of this book. It is wonderfully beautiful, and I love looking at the images of the brain that are presented there. In De Homine, Descartes first proposed the concept of the spinal reflex and worked out the neural pathways involved in the reflex. Further, Descartes postulated that the mind and body were two separate and distinct entities, a notion known as dualism. If the mind and the body are different, then how does the mind affect the body? Descartes postulated that this interaction occurred in a region called the pineal gland. He suggested the pineal gland for the sole reason that whereas most other brain structures are double, located symmetrically in the two hemispheres, the pineal gland is singular, like consciousness. And Descartes believed erroneously that the pineal gland existed only in humans and not other animals. In the 19th century, there were two disputes about the brain, where functions and behaviors localized specific areas of the brain. Proponents of cerebral localization, like Franz Joseph Gall, 1758 to 1828, believed that behaviors were localized, that increases in ability in a particular behavior related to an increased brain growth in that area. You could therefore examine the bumps of the skull, presumably because the brain grows below like a muscle and pushes up the skull, and determining certain aspects of personality, memory, and emotion. This is called phrenology. Though Gall was wrong and phrenology discredited, There was growing evidence of cerebral localization. Recall that Broca localized speech production to the left frontal lobe. Another anatomist, Carl Wernicke, identified a region of the posterior superior temporal gyrus involved in speech comprehension, now called Wernicke's area. Today, researchers have identified multiple areas of the brain that participate in a variety of specific functions, from facial recognition to spatial working and memory. You can look at this image here. So even though phrenology has been discredited, we currently look at brain's locations with specific identifiable regions involved in particular behaviors.